Welcome back to another edition of Zero Block 30. Cons will be back in just a minute, but today we have 5 rounds in the magazine. Round number 1, we're going to do a little bit of ZBT Mast, which Mast is the Navy term for whenever you're getting in trouble. You have to go do a little NJP goofing. We're going to see if that's needed or not, because up in Oregon, there was a mail carrier who's being accused of beating a wild turkey to death while on his mail route. We're going to decide if the our mail carrier needs to be court-martialed or not. Round number 2, we have another mess that we need to do, because this time a Florida man is ticketed for going 50 and a 30, but there's some evidence on his side this time. He says that he just got a Dodge Charger, didn't know how to get it out of sports mode, and to make matters work, he just found out that Putin might try to use nuclear weapons. What is the guy supposed to do? Yeah,
you gotta be rushing home.
See. Yeah, exactly right.
Absolutely.
Round number 3, there was some bird pit legislation that gets approval in the House, but insiders aren't sure if it'll even see a vote in the Senate, which is pretty damn typical. We're going to talk about that. There's a lot of people hemming and hawing, I would say, over this legislation and trying to make excuses for their political team, which is always cute to do online. Round number 4, there's some Russian POVs this weekend that gave a stirring speech. Many veterans in the Western world have asked people not to share the video. We're going to give you the reasons why, but we're also going to get into the whether or not we think it's actually bad to share these POW videos that are coming out of Russia. And I think that it is complicated. I don't think it's a simple black and white answer. I think it's a very complicated issue. And finally, round number 5, we have an interview with Jennifer Caffarella, who is the chief of staff at the Study of War and a visiting fellow at the George Mason National Security Group, where she's going to join us to break down in a very intelligent way about what's next in Ukraine and how they're going to move forward. And this is exciting because when I reached out to Jennifer, I just seen her work on Twitter. She shares a lot of the maps, and it really gives you, for me, when I'm looking at war stuff, having a map to kind of base what I'm looking at and how much territory they've actually taken is incredibly helpful. And what these groups are doing and disseminating information that's not propaganda and things like that has been very helpful. I reached out to her. Oddly enough, her boyfriend is a dog handler, Marine.
No way.
Yeah. So when I was interviewing her, it was kind of like interviewing my wife, where you have a very accomplished and very intelligent woman who works in academic fields, and then you have a man on the other side who just likes to play with puppies. Like, it was something that I very much recognized with. So that was a nice little conversation that we have. And all that today is going to be brought to you by our good friends at Whistle Pig. The piggyback barrel-aged craft cocktail is in a can, and it's so much better than a seltzer. It's crisp, it's refreshing, it's super bold and flavorful, and there's nothing else like it on the market. That's because it's 8% alcohol by volume. It's made with 100% estate-grown rye from the Whistle Pig farm. I had no idea that they did that kind of stuff. I had no idea that you could put it in rye, but they put it in their barrels and it tastes delicious. I haven't met a single person yet who has tried it and said that they didn't like it. So you could be one of those too. And with St. Patrick's Day coming up, they have a good deal. You can use the promo code ZBT22 to receive $10 or 10% off your order at cans.whistlepig.com for St. Patrick's Day coming up. And the mint one is light enough where you can add some green food coloring. So you could be festive and cute and adorable as well. So do that at whistlepig.com. All right, let's get going with the actual show today. Lots of stuff to cover. One thing I did whenever the Ukraine war started off, when the Russia's invasion of Ukraine started, is I followed those trending topics on Twitter. Like, they have this little banner that you can click on, war in Ukraine, and you can follow it and you get all the updates. I had to unfollow that shit. It's been in my brain too much, where every time I pick up my phone, because I did that, it was like right at the top, every single thing. Dude, there gets to be a point where you have to step away. And I reached that point yesterday, like going through it and seeing pictures of babies. And like, there was this video going around of this little Ukrainian girl that was in a bomb shelter and singing Frozen, something from Disney's Frozen, but singing it in Ukrainian. I was like, God damn, dude, just fucking brutal all the way across.
Yeah, it's just really unfortunate to think that this doesn't feel like it's going to end anytime soon. So to consume it all day, every day, I don't think is feasible. Unfortunately, this isn't something.
However, to that point, Cons, there is some good news coming out, and a lot of the analysts that I've follow and have been seeing doing deep dive into a lot of these reports. Some of them are saying that Russia might have like 10 weeks left tops of what they're able to do militarily. They're bringing in, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but videos are coming out of different trains that are coming in from Russia, trying to make it nearer to the front lines there in Ukraine. they don't even have military vehicles on the convoys. Like these trains are being loaded down with like what would be airport shuttle buses and small farming equipment and things like that. There was one where it was like 500-meter long convoy that was nothing but fuel tanks, completely blown to shit. Every time they try to get fuel down, they have no logistics. One of these things, and we're going to get into it later on in the show, but I want to say starting out, man, how dumb do Ted Cruz and that fucking group look, where they constantly saw the Russian recruiting videos for military and were like, this is the strongest military on the world, and they can't stop stepping on their own dicks. They're not capable of shit.
Yeah, they're pretty inept, in fact.
Yeah, that's been interesting to see, but I'm glad that,
it's kind of, I will say,
brain fart, just enormous brain fart right there. I will say, it sucks. Like we can turn it off, and there's people that are living it that just they're stuck in it. Some of the images, Lindsay Adario, she's a photo. I follow all these photojournalists because I feel like they're some of the best eyes on the ground. They have been in the shit, like in the shit. Clarissa Ward, like they've all been, and some of these images coming out of the peace corridor, the green corridor, where Russia said, fine, all the civilians can get out this way. And then that getting mortared and bombed over the weekend. The images from that were just horrific. An entire family of 4 taken out. But you're right. It's terrible. But
and Clarissa Ward, man, what a fucking year for her. Like because she was the one that was staring down the Taliban at the withdrawal too. Like just an absolute brave woman. My God.
Yeah. Chaps, to your point, oh, go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
She's a mother, and I'm like, sorry guys, I can't come into Manhattan for a drink this weekend. The baby, and she's like, all right, I'll be in Syria. See you later. I'll be back in a minute. It's like I was just so impressed by these people and the things they're doing. But anyway,
I was just gonna say, it just gave me an image when you think about how inept. Going back to that point, the Russian military has been, it's kind of like back in high school when there was that kid in school who everyone was kind of intimidated by. He was like kind of bigger and he would always talk tough and he always talk about like, he'll beat you up and you know, don't cross him because you'll end up in bad shape. And then finally push comes to shove, he gets in a fight and he just gets his world rocked. That's kind of like what it feels like.
Chris Pryor at Tate High School, class of 2000. He was like that, just a huge guy, 6'4", and was real rude. Then I remember at a football practice one day, got his ass absolutely handed to him by a guard that was like 5'8" and like 240 pounds, which is a typical high school guard. Whooped the shit out of him.
Maybe un-American of me though, but I will say we sound awfully smug for a group that got bogged down in a 20-year war that we did not win and spent trillions of dollars and lost
taking a shot at America.
Lives.
Well done,
wow.
Kate. So all those anti-Americans are. We can talk shit about Russia, Kate. I think that's a laugh.
It's okay.
We're allowed to talk shit about Russia.
We're allowed to shit on Russia without
Katie,
caveat.
Katie offended, getting upset that the Russian military is getting shit on.
I'm not offended in any way. Wow. I'm glad they're getting bogged down. But
welcome back to Sputnik Blog 30.
Screw you guys. I'm not saying that.
Unreal.
Russia.
Listen, guys, we got to give a Russian something here.
No,
they're doing great.
Okay. All
right. Let's move on. Let's get going with round number 1. Okay, what do we have? This is a little bit of a turkey round. And I got to admit, have you guys, first of all, before we get into, have you guys ever been attacked by wild birds?
Yes, I have.
What kind of bird?
So it was the Pennsylvania Pet Convention that my Aunt Jill took my cousins Lisa, Rachel, and I to when I was
not the one that the famous 1997 one, right?
No, actually, honest to God, it may have been 97. Yes, the Pennsylvania Pet Convention. We got to hold a boa constrictor on our laps. I still have the Polaroid, but then we go over to the emu zone, and you're thinking, oh, you hold out your hand, friendly little emus. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I hate ostriches and emus ever since then. I'll never go near them. When I take my son to the zoo, I say, no, we're not going over there. We will never give them attention. They're attention-seeking birds, and we'll never give it to them. And so, yes, no, they're terrifying. There's a video on Barstool right now of this couple in their car going through the thing with the peanuts, and the ostrich sticks its head in the car, and the guy accidentally drops the peanuts on his lap, and the ostrich is going ham on his dick. It's terrifying.
Good gracious.
Yeah,
anybody who's played golf in the Northeast in the early parts of the year has tangled with a geese or two in their day, or goose, excuse me.
Thank you. Yes, there's that video of all the troops coming into one of the buildings on some military base, and this goose is making all these big troops look like Clowns.
Oh yeah, like by the
They're all running
flagpole,
from
right?
it.
Isn't it right by the
Yeah,
flagpole
yeah.
in there?
They're
But
all
it's,
like,
we went on a vacation to Orlando, and there was these birds that I swear to God they probably used to be raptors that were walking around Orlando. And it's a very stereotypical townhouse that's around Orlando, where each one has like their own individual pool with the screened-in porch in the back. They're all over the Orlando area that are like that. And we get out, and I was at a time where I had a pit bull named Rondo, and Rondo gets out of the car after driving from Texas all the way to Orlando, stopping at my mother-in-law's for the night. I let Rondo out. He was very well trained, but he sees one of these birds, and the birds chase Rondo, and he's like an 85-pound, 90-pound pit bull, huge, muscular. Like I used to feed him fucking salmon and raw eggs and shit to get him beefy. This bird does not give a fuck and comes running after Rondo. The front door of the house that we're staying in is open. Rondo darts inside, has never seen a glass screen door in his life, runs, smashes into it. And then the bird is just standing there like, gotcha, bitch, on the outside. Oh, yeah. It set the tone for the week, honestly.
Birds used to chase my cat through the yard. He would like be begging to come back inside because birds would be like dive bombing him. Yeah, birds don't fuck around.
Birds have an attitude problem.
You know what? I wish somebody out there would give a bird like a turkey the what for, would show him what the fuck's going on.
Well, okay, you are in luck because that's exactly what happened to one postal carrier, but he's in a world of hot water. Some might even say he's in a little bit of turkey broth, right, Kate?
Oh, he might be. He might be. His goose might be cooked.
Steamed, all that.
California wildlife authorities and the U.S. Postal Service are investigating reports that a mail carrier beat a wild turkey to death in Sacramento County. Witnesses wrote in posts on the social media app Nextdoor that a mail carrier, after being accosted by a very aggressive turkey, retrieved a pole or stick from his vehicle and used it to fatally beat the bird on Monday. Friendly reminder, I keep a broken off pitching wedge in my car. I keep it right down below where the baby sits. Anyways.
And we have a little miniature baseball bat that I had embroidered with the words hot sauce, so my wife can keep hot sauce in her bag swag.
Mm-hmm, exactly. We are currently launching a thorough investigation of the incident, said Mike O'Patton, a local U.S. Postal Service spokesman. Our employees have had several altercations with aggressive turkeys in the area, including a recent attack on a letter carrier. We've been working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to mitigate the issue. However, this allegation is alarming and, if true, is inexcusable and do not reflect the efforts of our more than 650,000 employees who faithfully serve and deliver for America every day.
I love that caveat. Listen, all of our nearly 750,000 carriers, they aren't out there beating the shit out of turkeys on the daily. They're not.
I don't care.
I will say this too. I never gave thought to it. I didn't realize we had that many people working for the post office. It makes sense, but that's a large number.
Personally, I do believe that this incident reflected them all. I saw 3 different mail carriers on my way to the office. They're all over New York City, and I screamed turkey killer at every single one of them this morning.
And you used to be a UPS worker, so you have a little bit of insight on the industry.
Yes, I certainly do. I'm pretty much, basically, I am a mail carrier, some would say. But I scream turkey killer at every single one.
That's the real reason why they call you Brown Pants Katie.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why. Captain Patrick Foy, a local spokesman with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, said that his department first received reports of turkey aggression from the Postal Service in October in the same neighborhood as this week's deadly incident. The U.S. Postal Service contacted us and said, we have a huge problem with extremely aggressive turkeys that are actually attacking mail carriers in this one particular neighborhood.
And I do think that this is a tough issue to deal with if you're a mail carrier, because if you're doing this and you go back to your boss and you're like, listen, there's these fucking turkeys and they're really giving me the what for on a daily. What am I authorized to do here? Like, what are the rules of engagement?
And nobody's going to take you seriously, but I bet you day after day, it wears on your soul being like,
it absolutely has to be crushing every day. Be like, oh God, going down Wagner Street again? That's where all these turkeys are. Why do they keep ordering stuff?
It's like Step Brothers when they take the wrong way home and they get jumped by the kids.
Oh yeah.
Lick the poop.
The turkeys making the Postal Service lick the poop. The white dog shit.
Yeah, these carriers have a belly full of white dog shit.
Fish and Wildlife said that the Postal Service has been telling them about this since last fall and has been like, and they say, when I say attacked, it is physical contact. They're jumping on them. Like, so these turkeys are jumping on the postal carriers.
It's a ridiculous visual.
Boy said his department sent a wildlife officer out to this area to observe the aggressive behavior and nothing happened. But then they sent a wildlife biologist the biologist observed 4 turkeys aggressively going after mail carriers when they got out of their trucks. They surrounded him. They said, so these turkeys are evolving. Echelon right, I believe, was seen. There was a rally point. There was an ambush. They were using little wing signals and doing all sorts of crazy shit. They had knives. So Foy and his Fish and Wildlife attempted.
Oh, no, we're not going to skip over that line. They said that they're going to unleash a cornucopia of murder, which is.
Some are saying I wrote
They've had it up.
but
They've had it up to their neck.
Yeah,
that's still from the Sacramento
exactly.
Bee. Yeah.
They're going to gobble these mail carriers up. Foy said Fish and Wildlife attempted to capture some of the turkeys, but were unsuccessful. So they're learning this. What is it? The evading course?
Oh, EVOC?
No. The one that
about Sear School?
Oh,
Sear School. These turkeys have been through sear. It used to be we would sear the turkey on the grill. Now they're searing us.
No, they sear us. Yeah.
Right. Things cooled off a bit for a few months until this week when Foy said and that's classic turkeys letting everybody get complacent again.
Well, they know not to come out during hunting season.
Exactly. So the turkeys stepped back for a little bit, and then this past week, they got news that the mail carrier had used a club to defend himself from a turkey and killed it. Half the neighborhood was infuriated that the mailman killed a turkey.
Yeah, because no matter what, even if you because turkeys, lest we forget, on the back of their little toes, they have very sharp talon. They will rip you to fucking shreds. That does not matter when you're caught on video beating the shit out of a turkey with a stick. Like, it doesn't matter if you have to be actively nearly gorged to death to get away from cancel culture if you're beating a turkey. Yeah. Like, in reality, if my kids were coming home from school and Kelsey was like, Dad, there's this turkey that was trying to get me, I beat the shit out of it with a stick, I wouldn't be mad in the slightest. But there is no explanation that you could put out on social media that will cure that mob's wanting to go after you for killing a turkey. None.
Well, they said half the neighborhood's mad that this mailman killed the turkey. The other half is infuriated that the government won't come out and get rid of these turkeys. So some people are pissed, and
there's basically two schools of turkey thought.
2 schools of gobble on this. Yeah. Fish and Wildlife officials investigating the incident to see if the mail carrier committed any crimes. They declined to specify what sort of charges this postal worker would face. I feel like if the postal worker had come out with a 22 and just boom, everyone would be like, all right, that was clean. But to see a turkey beaten with a pole is a little rough. The optics are not
I think in a neighborhood, I'd rather it be beaten with a stick than firing
a mail carrier carrying a weapon like that.
Okay, fair. Okay, can we compromise? He should have come out with a machete and just slacked the neck off.
That's why I've said it for years that every post office worker needs to have one of those net guns that you see on like Looney Tunes.
A net gun, yes.
Like if you go out there and you just have them all on the net, then you can be like, look, these things were trying to come after me, dude. Like, what am I supposed to do?
And then you tell the neighborhood that's so pissed, if you guys want, then let them out of the net. You do.
And I sympathize with these postal workers too, because I think we're all forgetting, because our view of turkeys, I don't think, do either of you, have you ever seen a turkey up close and personal?
Oh, we got all kinds of turkeys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Like I think we are used to seeing them, cooked on a table. Those things are pretty big when they're just walking around town, fluttering about. They're very big, and then they're a little more intimidating than I think folks are given credit for. So these postal workers shouldn't feel intimidated or embarrassed.
S2 briefing on fucking turkeys.
Thank you.
I would say too, a neighbor went out after the postal worker left. A neighbor went out and got the turkey carcass and kept it until Wednesday, Foy said, when a wildlife official retrieved it. They're doing an investigation. Imagine being the one that has to do a post-mortem on a turkey for legal purposes.
And it's already been brined and shit.
Right, exactly. I've been with the department this is Foy again. He said, I've been with the department 25 years and I have a little bit of experience with turkeys. It was the biggest turkey I've ever seen. He called the turkey attack on humans uncommon, but not unheard of. This was a mail carrier who's been dealing with this big ass turkey for probably years, watching this turkey get bigger and stronger, more brazen. And one day he probably just fucking snapped.
This turkey's basically Russian.
That's fucking enough. That's enough.
Yeah. And he just wants to get out of the area. I feel bad for postal workers. Like every time I see on TikTok, they're pretty common, of a UPS worker, Amazon worker, somebody getting chased away by a dog. Dude, like you have to leave a delivery service type job with legitimate anxiety problems, like over a certain house. Because what do you like? You can't, nobody else is doing that route but you. And if there's constantly mean dogs that are behind like a small gate or something like that, it's got to be fucking terrifying.
Dude, I lived it. Once again, I worked for the Brown. Okay. Over the holidays, we were up against time. The truck was packed. He's like, just run in the yard. I'd be halfway through a yard and all of a sudden dogs would come running. Some old lady would open the door and go, don't worry, she's friendly. And the dog would be ripping my bootlaces out.
Dude, those are
the worst
famous
people.
last words.
I'm like, what the
Don't
fuck
worry,
are you
they're
talking
friendly.
about? Your dog's
They're always
friendly. Get your
the ones that
fucking
bite
dog.
are always friendly.
Yeah,
Those
but you
people
just,
that do that shit with their dogs, like this is what my wife, for instance, hated most dogs before we got married, because most people don't teach their dogs damn manners. Like they'll have long nails, jumping up on you, scratching your legs and shit. Like if that's the way your dog behaves, spoiler alert, people hate your dog. Like whenever you go, if you go to somebody's house and their dog jumps up and scratches you on your legs and nipping at you and stuff, people are acting like your dog is cute, but in reality, they hate your dog.
Chaps, what do you think about this? Just like we have to get a license to drive a car, you got to pass a course to own a dog.
Communist con strikes again. Sad.
Can I say one more dog anecdote here since you're talking about dogs fucking around with people? After my divorce, when I moved back down to Philly, Peggy's basement, whatever.
And I just want to say, whatever you say next, you totally get a passport, because if you're doing it mid-divorce, doesn't matter. Doesn't count.
Thank you. I was still looking for a job at this time. And this was like right after the UPS thing had ended. And my Aunt Peg was like, I have friends who own a washing machine business in South Philly, like a mom and pop small store.
Laundromat?
Do you want to go sell washing machines? I was like, sure. So I went there to interview. It was like small. They had like 10 old washing. It was like a used washing machine sales place in South Philly, whatever. I go to interview. I'm wearing a skirt.
You're leaving. You're like, please let me get it. Please let me get it.
Yes. It was for like $11 an hour. I'm wearing a skirt with stockings and Payless flats. I was wearing stockings. That's how like old lady I am, I guess. During the interview, which was just right on the showroom floor, one of those little white dogs.
Showroom, like you're at a fucking Lexus dealership.
Shut up. It was one of those little white dogs with like the eye boogers. You know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
Came over and was just scratching the shit out of my legs during the interview. So I'm answering
your
questions
stockings all the way up.
Just getting all sorts of runs.
I was like, I guess I'm getting interviewed, so I can't react. I was just like, hey there, hi. I just let it happen. I walked out of there with literally my stockings just shredded at my fucking ankles.
Bleeding.
And if my guess is you
apologized.
You probably apologized, didn't you?
I was just like, oh, goofball. Hey there. But like, ooh, like we're just goofing. It was the most awkward. Anyway, turkeys. These turkeys. I
think we're done there. I don't think we need to go anymore.
Hey, okay. Neighbors are feeding them.
Oh,
the Fish and Wildlife Service found out that neighbors have been leaving huge amounts of food out in their yards.
Oh,
sunflower seeds, cracked corn, all sorts
Jimmy
of
cracked
shit.
corn, and I don't care.
But I will say it's very smart to get these turkeys on your side, though. I'd rather have them on my side than not.
I mean, they're finally, after all these generations, they're finally rising up against Thanksgiving. We can't let it happen.
Boy, though, are you guys personally? We're doing the mast. Are you blaming the mail carrier? No, me neither. He's off the hook.
I think once an animal draws blood on you, you have full rights to do whatever you need to do to defend yourself.
Snap that
unless it's
neck.
A cat. They scratch a little sometimes.
No, I disagree. Some of these cats they need to go too. Like some of the cats that are just, and cats, because they're
conversation's a slippery slope.
Cats are just, I love Sprinkle Dinkles. Don't get me wrong. Sprinkle Dinkles, I love her to death. But I feel like cats have more apologists than other animals. Like if a turkey scratches you to shit, people are like, oh, that turkey's an asshole. A dog does it. A cat does it. And you're like, oh, it's just being a precious little kitty. Like, no, it's not. It's trying to get me fucking diseases.
They're temperamental people is what that is. So just let it go.
Stop it. We're not making.
All right, let's move on to round number 2, which today is going to be brought to you by our good friends at BetterHelp. If you've been attacked by turkeys or other things, make sure that you're getting the help that you need. Relationships can take work, and a lot of us will need to drop anything to help that. Let me start over again, as you were. Oh my goodness, I haven't done that kind of ad read in a rough. Relationships take work. A lot of us will drop anything to help somebody that we care about. We'll go out of our way to help treat other people well, but how often do we give ourselves that same treatment? It's super important. Like lately, lots of stuff is going, if you're paying attention to Ukraine, if you're paying attention to a lot of things that are going around the world, it's going to affect your mental health. Don't wait until it becomes debilitating. Deal with it in the moment. Deal with it as quickly as you can, because it's going to be easier for the therapist to guide you along and give you some advice. BetterHelp is an online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy. therapy and can be matched with a therapist in just 48 hours. Give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp online therapy. And one of the things that I really like about mine is that my therapist, I've been with her for probably around 4 or 5 months now, seeing the same person from BetterHelp. On Friday afternoons, usually around 3 or 4, she'll text me, hey, remember to have a good weekend, take a step away and do things that you need to for your own mental health as well. And I'm always appreciative of, it's almost like she's given me a little therapy version of a safety brief before I go into the weekend, which is something that I really appreciate. If you need something like that too, which I would imagine most of you might, go to betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com/0. You're going to get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/0. It's fantastic. Make sure you try it out. Let's move on to round number 2. We have our second captain's mask to do. Kate, what do we have here?
Boy, oh boy, is this guy a turkey? A real turkey. So a man stopped for speeding in Central Florida, blamed Vladimir Putin for his lead foot. Is it Flagler County or Flagler?
It's Flagler. It's just north or just south of Jacksonville. Where
or is it French? Is it?
That's St. Augustine.
Flagler?
That's St. Augustine. You've been there, Kate.
I had a
cousin who went to Flagler University.
Oh.
Yeah, and it has clay roofs, which I always find to be very adorable. Actually, before we move on, I want people to hear this traffic stop. So Nick's going to drop in the sound of the traffic stop of this guy getting pulled over, driving his Dodge Charger. And honest to God, he didn't even know. He was trying to get out of it, but he was in sports mode. Here he is.
I got this here.
You were looking at your dash while doing 50 miles an hour.
I was trying to get it out of. Okay, it's in sport mode. I was trying to get it. I just got this thing, okay, sir?
Sir, I literally saw you run the stop sign.
I'm sorry.
Make a left turn.
I'm sorry, sir.
And then hop on the gas. I was sitting right at the intersection.
I'm so sorry, sir.
So your excuses?
I saw a car coming and I...
You didn't, because I was sitting right there.
Well,
I saw
a car coming and I wanted to get out before them.
And then you dropped on the gas and took off.
I'm so sorry, sir.
I need to see your insurance card, please.
Oh. You got the registration?
Yeah, there was no reason for that at all. I would put people's lives into safety and everything.
I just found out, I'm trying to tell you the truth, guy. I just found out that Putin is just said he's going to launch nuclear thermal war against the world. I was trying to get back to my house to find out what's going on. I'm freaking out here, guy. Okay? I got people in the Ukraine.
I feel like when you have a brand new car, you're cruising through a beach town, and I think he was on A1A, which is the highway that goes right next to the beach. He's on A1A going through. He's seeing all this stuff, driving a new Charger in sports mode, and then you couple that with nuclear threats from Putin. I feel like you got to let this guy go.
Yeah, I love this quote. I just found out that Putin just says he's going to launch nuclear thermal war against the world. I was just trying to get back to my house to find out what's going on. I mean,
right, because the radio didn't work.
What a brilliant thing to say. Have you guys ever tried to lie your way out of a speeding ticket or something?
The only things I think would work, diarrhea. I feel like if you are getting pulled over and you're driving erratically and you tell the cop, look, I'm just trying to get to the closest Whataburger, McDonald's somewhere. I got a river of gravy flowing in my bowels right now.
If I'm a police officer, you can say that, but if you don't look a little bit gray and a little bit dewy, a little
what
sweaty,
if you shit your pants right there?
You'd have to. That's the only way.
Let's say you're going
at that point,
85 and a 50. Let's put yourselves in positions of cops. You pull somebody over going 85 and a 50, 35 miles an hour over. You could technically take somebody to jail for that because it's reckless. So, but you get to their window, you ask them to roll down the window. The moment you do, the stench of diarrhea leaves the car and hits you in the nose. And they say, I'm sorry, officer, this recruit has diarrhea. I feel like you got to let him go.
Depends on what kind of day I'm having as an officer. But yeah, it's plausible.
As an officer whose job is to protect the general public, I would then say, okay, but I'm going to follow you home now. Let's take it easy. Stay calm. I'm with you. I got your 6, but we're going to because I don't want somebody with diarrhea driving erratically then back on the highway again.
Well, I think if you let it loose, you're no longer in danger. The public's back to being safe. Once your seats are filled with diarrhea, I feel like you're good. But I also think as the cop, you got to make sure that the person steps out the car, because it can't be a firm log that comes out.
Yeah.
Like you can always hold a log a little longer, but diarrhea, I feel like gives you carte blanche to speed.
If the cop's worth his salt, he should just give you an escort home.
Yeah.
As opposed to following you.
Oh, do you mean like a coded?
Oh, like
escort?
sirens
Yeah.
on,
Like
like
they
let's
throw
get
it on
him
code
home.
three.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's get this guy home.
I don't think it necessitates or even would allow for sirens, but I think lights, you're absolutely right, Cons.
Yeah.
I think too, if I could tell the guy, if it was a guy cop and I could tell he was like a real conservative type, I'd be like, I'm perioding in my pants.
Yeah, I feel like you could get away with a lot of
And
stuff.
I'd fumble some tampons around in my hand, and he'd be like, "Yikes! No,
Can you help me put one of these bad boys in? My
Get out
fingers.
of here.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty. I got arthritis.
I will say, I've never. I don't think I've ever tried to get out of a ticket. The very first time I ever got pulled over, I had just gotten my license. I was still in high school, and my mom let me drive some of the neighborhood girls to the movies. And it was nighttime out. And on the way home, I didn't realize like you got to turn headlights on at night. So I was driving a car full of girls home in the dark with no headlights on, and I got pulled over by a cop. I had no idea why I got pulled over. Didn't even know my lights weren't on, nothing. He was probably expecting a drunk driver. And instead he asked me where my registration and stuff was. I didn't know where you kept it in the car. I was like, I don't know anything. He was like, oh, you're just a fucking moron. He didn't say that, but that's like what the gist was. And he was like, here's where your lights are. Please turn your light. Like, and then, yeah. So
see,
I've been lucky.
Nightmare. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've been lucky. I've always had PBA cards. I don't know if those are a thing down south, but I've always had a PBA card, and now I have a gold
those are
PBA card.
ridiculous. That's not fair, right?
Make
No,
friends
I
with the
like it.
cops.
My tune
I am
my
totally
tune
on
would
board
change.
with bribing if you need to.
My tune would change if I had one, but since I don't,
I'll
I'm gonna
get
say
you one.
that's bullshit. Thank
All right,
you.
I'll get you
Thank
one.
you. Here's the top reasons. Carinsurance.com asked. They just did this big survey, and they asked police officers like, what have actually worked on you? Like, what excuses did you actually like? All right, fine. Number one, I didn't know I was speeding. People like who genuinely were like, oh man, I didn't know this, whatever changed. Medical emergency. Everyone else was going the same speed, late for work. I have to use the bathroom, late for an interview, late to pick up or drop off my child. Didn't see the sign, late for court appointment, late for doctor appointment.
Interesting that they don't have on there was listening to Sabotage by Beastie Boys.
Yeah, it was listening to, it was listening, or Putin was not an answer.
Or like when I got pulled over with Kate and Bren, whenever I was listening to Dreams and Nightmares by Meek Mill.
We were listening to Dreams and Nightmares really loud, and we were just so into it.
Two other songs that this would apply to: Straight Outta Compton by NWA and or Fast Car by Tracy Chapman.
What about Girls Just Want to Have Fun?
Yeah, that's true too.
I swear to God, I have had moments where I'm listening to, not with the baby in the car, but beforehand, where I have the music cranked up and I'm singing and I'm on a road trip and I look and I'm doing like 95. I'm like, oh shit. Oh,
that's interesting because I actually have a video that you sent me in selfie mode where Cash was in the back seat and you're doing that same thing.
I was doing that shit. Yeah.
So one time, actually, I was riding with a state trooper in the front seat of their car, and I just asked him like straight up, like, what will cause you to pull somebody over? And he said, you usually get some leeway up to about 15 miles per hour over. But if it's above 15, that's when they kind of perk their ears up and they'll come get you if you're pretty.
See, I've always heard 11 on the highway and 6 in the city. Like nobody's going to pull you for going 6 or less, and nobody's going to pull you 11 and over.
Yeah.
I feel like that's pretty 15 over. If you're in 70 and going 85, I feel like you can expect the ticket.
I'm overdue. I used to be a huge ticket collector.
I also don't think they should be allowed to pull people over at certain periods of time unless what you're doing is exceedingly reckless. Like if it's during rush hour traffic, if somebody's going 15, 20 mile an hour above the speed limit and they're not being reckless, I feel like you got to let them go, because then if you pull them over, you're definitely going to have traffic jams for sure. Because people are looky-loos.
True. I think
it
largely depends on the road you're on too, because 15 miles an hour over on a straight shot, like the New Jersey Turnpike, that's nothing. That's Monday.
I completely agree. Yeah. All right, let's move on to something completely different. We're going to head over to the House of Representatives, where this week they had a huge vote on burn pits. It's something that we've been following closely, and Hunter Seven and many other organizations, Jon Stewart and people like that, are really involved with it as well. There was last month, they had a bill that went through the Senate that was passed, and that bill had a price tag of $1 billion. but there's a lot of information that goes into that. So I think when this bill came out, there is typically, to set the scene a little bit, whenever you're having debates that happen in the House or in the Senate, there is going to be two sides. Like there is everything in America, where you have certain bills that are going to be good for everybody that will maybe get bipartisan support, which doesn't seem to happen a lot now. And then you're going to have some that are going to be a little bit more contentious. This one was pretty bipartisan, I would say, because there was about 40, I think it was 46 votes on the Republican side that voted in favor of the burn pit legislation as well. But a lot of times they don't pass it when you think, why won't you pass that? It seems very common sense. Well, because there'll be a lot of pork bills that attach to it. There'll be a lot of things that are just put in to the bill to get passed, and like pet things and art projects and all kinds of shit. That didn't really seem to be the case here. It was just, I think it was a lot of misunderstanding from people who were viewing it of what was actually going on. Let's get from the information from Task and Purpose, from an article that's written a lot more coherently than what I just said. Kate, will you walk us through that article?
So the House of Reps passed a bill that would greatly expand healthcare coverage for military vets exposed to toxic chemicals and other materials, which is probably all of us in some way or another. The Honor Our Pact Act would grant new disability benefits to 23 illnesses that have been linked to battlefield pollutants, most notably smoke from so-called burn pits that gained so much notoriety in Iraq and Afghanistan. So 23 specific issues. If you have one of these, you've been diagnosed with one of these, you're now going to get coverage and get help. The bill passed the House with a vote of 256 to 174. For too long, Congress and the VA have been slow to act on toxic exposure, but today the House took a bipartisan vote to change that and finally made good on their promise to toxic exposed vets, said Rep. Mark Decano from California. He's the bill sponsor and the Vet Affairs Committee chairman. The vote came 2 days after President Biden delivered his State of the Union, where he called upon Congress to pass laws to make sure veterans devastated by toxic exposure finally get the benefits and healthcare they deserve. As many as 3.5 million service members are thought to have suffered some exposure to toxic fumes and substances from burn pits since 2001. I'm definitely one of them. I slept literally at certain times. I slept about 5 feet on the other side of a mud wall from a burning thing, just in the smoke day and night. I just lived in it. I was like bathed in it. And
how much did you just not think about it? Right. Like that was just part of your existence.
Well, you were a pussy if you complained about it. I mean, what were you going to do? Your hands were kind of tied.
Right.
And
Can you
it's
imagine
not even
the response if somebody came up and be like, Gunny, my fucking tent has smoke next to it. They tell you to go fuck yourself in a heartbeat.
Yeah, there's bigger fish to fry in the moment. And even on stateside, we've talked about countless times on different bases. Look at what's going on at Hickam in Pearl Harbor right now. The fucking
Walter
fuel,
Reed of all places.
Walter Reed, fuel in the water, just awful conditions everywhere. Anyway, assessing healthcare for medical issues thought to be associated with exposure has proven challenged for many, as the effects of exposure to smoke and fumes from burn pits was poorly understood. The Department of Veteran Affairs has attributed a limited range of health effects to burn pit exposure and has placed the responsibility on individual veterans to prove that their adverse health effects were directly attributable to burn pit exposure. So imagine you're dying from cancer, that you've done the research and you can see, oh boy, a lot of people throughout history have been exposed to this type of smoke, have the same kind of cancer as me. I'm already dying and suffering, and now I have to fight to try and I have to expend extra energy to try and prove it to Veterans Affairs.
And I think that this is a note for civilian listeners, because I think that the way that the military looks on the outside, it looks like it's this very well-oiled machine that is going to keep meticulous records about all the different service members. That is absolutely not the case, and not even remotely close. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I was getting retired and I was looking at like my medical documentation, it said that one of the reasons why I was being retired was because that there was a gunshot wound to my right hand. I got shot in my left forearm. So like, if you're going to get that type of detail wrong, what else are you not getting right? There has been parts where entire schools that I went to weren't in my record book because it got dropped the ball at S1. Like I was an instructor at the Military Working Dog School. I was the chief instructor of the Military Working Dog School. And at a time they had no record that I had completed Military Working Dog Handler course myself. So there's just been, they've dropped the ball all the time. So this is not going to be something that's easy for these veterans to do, especially when you're talking 10, 15 years down the road.
And also to further that point, a lot of these veterans, and through no fault of their own, because the system's so gosh darn convoluted, the process by which you have to prove this is so ridiculous that most will just throw their hands up and say, I don't have time, or I don't have the patience, or they'll just get lost along the process and it'll never happen. So the fact that they're putting the burden back on the veterans, in my opinion, is horrible.
Which some negative Nancy's might say is by design. But
Oh, yeah.
anyways, in addition to burn pit exposure, the bill would also expand healthcare coverage to Cold War era service members exposed to radiation and hypertension and monoclonal gammopathy to the list of illnesses linked to Agent Orange exposure in the Vietnam War, and would require new medical exams for all veterans with toxic exposure claims. I have an uncle who has leukemia that has been tied directly to exposure from Agent Orange in the Vietnam War, and he's got a whole lot of buddies with the same shit. And they had to fight even longer and harder for any sort of record. Like, it's just insane. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that the bill could cost $208 billion with a B dollars over the next decade. The price tag is a major sticking point for those who have opposed the measure. Any thoughts on that, anyone?
To me, it's really disappointing to see so many, there's veterans that have said no. Like Mike Gallagher has been on the show, who I typically like a lot of things that Mike Gallagher says. There's Dan Crenshaw is another notable veteran that voted no against these types of things. And my thought is, I understand like wanting to be fiscally conservative, but if you voted against this and you voted for the tax cuts for the uber rich, you have no leg to stand on. Zero. Like, you could have not tax cut the rich and paid for this in a second. It would have been done and over. And if you're going to ask 20 years of people to volunteer to go fight your wars, you better be fucking ready for the 60 years when they come back. You better be ready for it.
Exactly. If you can spend trillions sending us to war, and if so many politicians are so comfortable using us as pawns in their campaigns and as talking points and as sticking points, and a lot of those same people who voted no, or a lot of people who sure do love using veterans and the military to be a fire starter point to get people on their side. And that was really disappointing to see.
I also just think when you're considering budget and everything, there are certain areas where, yeah, it's important to be frugal and be considerate of the budget. And there's other areas where if you quote unquote splurged a little, like this example right here, I don't think you're going to get a lot of pushback. Like, oh, if we go out of the budget and spend this money to give veterans the healthcare that they need and deserve, I don't think anyone's really going to bat an eye. And if they do, you're just a crummy person.
And to me, it's not even a splurge. It's something that veterans have earned.
No kidding. That's why I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you're listening, I did air quotes under splurged.
I know what you mean, but it's just,
yeah.
While the Senate has not indicated it would vote on the Honor Pact Act, it did last month approve a bill that would create a 1-year enrollment period for VA medical care for post 9/11 vets who served after 1998 and never enrolled, and also extend the enrollment period for all formerly deployed post 9/11 vets from 5 years to 10. Nevertheless, at a Wednesday news conference, advocates for the bill encouraged the Senate to take up the bill as opposed to a more piecemeal approach. If Senate Majority Leader Senator Chuck Schumer does that, then I will make his life miserable, said advocate John Field. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the difference between what's going on in the Senate and the House, from what I understand it, is that the Senate approach is 3-pronged, where they're going to do the first stage, and that's just getting everybody who wasn't able to get their benefits approved. Everybody that's been in the last 5 or 10 years that got denied, they can go back and see. That estimated cost is about $1 billion. The Senate does not go out for a decade. They aren't going out that far. That's the reason why I think the House bill is so important, because it's like, we know that this is going to be an issue. Let's not keep kicking the can down the road and say, we're going to do this in the next Congress, or we're going to do this in the next presidential term or whatever. They're just getting it out of the way because they know it's going to be a pervasive problem. This is going to be an issue. And I understand like the folks, like the more conservative people, small government, lower taxes and things like that. This is going to be an issue that is going to be very financially difficult for America to really deal with over the next 70 years. We've never had a war this long. We've never had this much of medical costs that at this price. People that get out don't have as good as medical insurance, so they are relying on the VA probably more than ever before. So you have all these issues. Where do you go from there? Like, what do you do? The answer is you do the right thing. And if people are struggling with leukemia, they can't breathe, they can't go around their day-to-day life, they're struggling in every single aspect because of the things that we required of them to do on a volunteer basis, you've got to pay for the healthcare. Like it just makes zero sense not to do that. And you should have known and put it into a fund. Like this should not come as a surprise that you're going to have issues after 20 years of war. And to act like it is surprising or, oh, we got to find the money. Shut the fuck up and find the money. Like find it. You find it for everything else.
The money's there. The money's there. So the whole like, oh, we got to find the money. I think that's a bunch of malarkey because the money's there. And
also one thing I think the money could be going really well towards is also preventative care. I know we talked about it with 107 before, but one of their big things was stop focusing on the burn pits. Let's start focusing on training all medical personnel to, if a veteran is a patient and you see on their notes, oh, it's a veteran, teach them to look for certain things that you might not look for someone their age. Right. Normally, if my patient's 40 years old, I'm not going to ask about their lungs or this or that or whatever. But if it says veteran there, I'm going to say, oh, did you deploy? And I will know to look for specific things that might nip this stuff in the bud and save money in the long run.
Right. It should trigger a screening.
Like
it could trigger a screening that would be very easy with a certain set of questions.
Like,
yes.
And nobody does. Doctors don't do the medical thing where they have like a chart in their hand and they're just writing down your notes. They're all sitting in front of a computer. Hey, what's your name? How old are you? Where were you born? Are you a veteran? And if you say yes, then it triggers another group of questions. It's fucking simple.
Exactly. And one last thing I'll say about the Congress and the Senate making, excuses, you'll always be able to find excuses on why not to do this. So you got to just suck it up this first time and just quote unquote, take it on the chin and just do it.
And
it's going to be painful, but just do it.
They approved in 2 hours, $200 billion worth of aid to Ukraine in 2 hours. So you could do that.
It's possible.
You could do that in 2 hours and figure it out, have a Zoom call with senators and congressmen, and they can find the allocation for $200 billion for another country, but you cannot find it for your own veterans over the course of 10 years. Give me a fucking break. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to round number 4. We're going to have an interview where we're going to keep talking about Ukraine, but this time in a much more intelligent way. Here's Jennifer. Now, Zero Block 30, we're privileged to have Jennifer Caffarella, who is the Chief of Staff of the Study of War, and she's also a visiting fellow at the George Mason National Security Group. She's doing all kinds of stuff. She's working. I'm seeing her Twitter account constantly reposting things, and her organization is reposting things. They're knee deep in all the data. So what we've typically done in the last couple of weeks here on Zero Block 30 is giving you our opinion about things that are happening on the ground as we would feel about doing it, like as being service members. I wanted Jennifer to come on to give us a little bit higher level thought of how people who are looking at national security from a wide scope are doing that. Jennifer, thank you for agreeing to come on and helping us in that cause.
You bet.
So the first question is from the United States. You have all of these national security agencies and groups that are trying to come together and have accurate information to deliver to not just America, but to the rest of the world, relying on our intelligence. How do you all gather this information as a civilian organization, and how do you analyze that? I know that's a huge open-ended question, but just as Barney style as you can, how does that information come about?
No, I appreciate the question because the Institute for the Study of War is somewhat unique among think tanks in how we approach producing analysis to inform decision-making in Washington. In my view, we're unique in a couple ways, but there are two big ones. The first is that we actually do orient on supporting the warfighter, and a core aspect of our mission is to make available our assessments to not only senior civilian and military decision makers in Washington, but to make those insights available publicly and available to elements of the force, that are either engaged currently in various conflicts or could engage. And so that is at the heart and soul of who we are as an organization. Second is that we take a fully open source approach to providing very granular information about the conflict zones that are relevant to US national security. So there are many, OSINT open source organizations out there that do similar types of things. But what we're most proud of at ISW is our understanding of war, of military conflict, of its realities and its requirements. And we're able to bring our depth of expertise in, the field of war to some of the latest, breaking policy questions in Washington, D.C., as well as to inform the formulation of policy. So the way that we produce our assessments is through a daily battle drill that is a pretty much around the clock collection effort by our team of analysts and interns who support our effort, who do essentially daily battle tracking of all of the military, political, and in some cases, information operations that happen in various battle spaces. So our main effort right now is, of course, Russia's war on Ukraine, but we have supporting efforts in other theaters as well. And we do that day-to-day sort of drumbeat of where have the Russians advanced? How can we verify, across multiple different types of sources that may include social media posts, formal Ukrainian military, publications. And then we do have a few technology partners, including some satellite imagery that we're able to layer in for instances, such as that 40-mile-long Russian convoy that has been stalled north of Kyiv.
And with that, I think that that's a great example with the convoy. So I think that this really helped illustrate to our listeners what you all would do. And I guess because I'm under the umbrella of Barstool Sports, I'll use a sports analogy. Analytics has become huge in sports, and even whenever you're getting down to 2-point conversion, or do you go for it on fourth down here? Are you guys looking at individual tactical decisions like what NATO would do or could do to this convoy that's 40 miles long, or are you looking broader scope as far as theater to theater operation?
So we do a blend, actually. I think the uniqueness of our approach comes from we invest most of our time in understanding adversary decision making and how our adversaries are resourcing the pursuit of their objectives. So how has Russia designed its campaign for the subjugation of Ukraine, right? And then what are we seeing on the ground, which can help us refine our understanding of what the Russians are going for, or evaluate, right, how successful they are in implementing their approach. So evaluating the progress and the success does often involve us getting hyper tactical in the weeds best we can with the information that we have available on, where are the Russians getting bogged down? Why are they failing to do combined arms maneuvers in the way that they're attempting, et cetera, et cetera. And so we kind of tailor how deep we go based on the situation and based on where we think the public domain needs the most information on the reality on the ground from the extent that we can assess it. Now, there are always gaps in open source, and we're hyper aware of ours. And candidly, that's what makes this kind of analysis particularly challenging and therefore, in my view, thrilling, is that you're handicapped in the open source, right? We don't have.
And because you guys are a bunch of nerds that love complicated things. It's like Wordle for national security dorks.
It is. And it's, of course, it's a devastating subject matter, right? And we're so, disappointed that it has come to this, but the challenge is certainly intellectually, stimulating.
Oh, I imagine so. And when you're having all this information come in, this feels so much different than the normal campaigns. And I'm sure that other areas of strife and conflict around the globe is experiencing this as well. But it feels to me, as somebody who's not a casual observer, but observes pretty closely, that the propaganda that's happening between Russia and Ukraine may be at an all-time high that we've ever seen in any war, much less a war that's been recent, and how they're using social media. That has to make your job much more difficult of parsing through what's actually true and what's not. How, in this very tumultuous time of using propaganda, how are you all determining what's real and what's not?
Yeah. So the good news as it relates to Ukraine is that the Russians have pretty much across the board failed at their attempted information operations, at least externally. Now, there are some of the domestic Russian information operations that unfortunately do seem to be successful in sort of
they're ramping those up, right?
Yeah, buffering the losses that Putin has accepted in this war. But globally, and as it relates specifically to Ukraine, the Russians are not winning. And part of that is because of the very savvy disclosures that the Biden administration has made of U.S. intelligence, warning in advance, this is the specific false flag operation, that the Russians are undertaking. This is the specific lie that the Russians are trying to propagate. And that has really blown the information space wide open. It has beat back what might otherwise have been successful Russian, IO campaigns. And it has created an opportunity for the Ukrainians to win this information fight, not only because they've kept their morale so high, but also because they're putting out, very well created videos and promotional materials showing their wins on the ground and the morale of that force. And that's been huge.
And with the Biden administration saying all those, and the U.S. intelligence across the board for Ukraine and Russia, this conflict has been essentially spot on from the beginning. How much talk goes into it? And were you involved in those talks, and your organization involved in those talks, of how much the Biden administration and U.S. intelligence should put out there? Because I imagine that's not an easy decision. Like, we know these things, and typically you want to keep those close to the vest, and actually disseminating it out, not just to the military, but to really the entire world about what Russia was trying to do.
Yeah, so we're fully independent from government. So that's not the kind of thing we would be involved in, in the super details. We do brief and we advise, our civilian and military leaders and folks from the intelligence community, but we're not deeply involved in that, at least anybody that's, on our staff. What we do, though, is in some cases paint the target through publicly available information that, hey, these are the suite of information campaigns that the Russians are running that, somebody should combat. And we can engage, in all kinds of briefings and recommendations for where and how the United States could weight our effort. Although in this case, I will say the Biden administration has done an even more fantastic job, I think, than we would have expected possible. And a lot of that comes from, the nitty gritty decisions that they've made about where to take risks, what kinds of things to declassify. And I think they've done a marvelous job.
And the declassification aspect is pretty important, like having that information out, not just for us to see, but for the rest of the world to see as well. Because when declassified information that should be classified gets out, it could cause great damage. And we kind of saw that in Russia with some of the Ukrainians capturing their tanks and also their battle plans, where we're seeing that, yes, they knew that they were going to invade. All the things that they were telling NATO were clearly a lie. None of that stuff was true. And they had a real 2-week markup where they said on March 6th, it should be over. That's when they anticipated being over. I want to flip that to another way for you all. Where do you all see the next 2 weeks kind of laying out? Because the first week has been very intense. What's next as far as what you're seeing the Russians, what are they going to do next?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, I would just reiterate that I think those intelligence disclosures have been not only important, but decisive. My colleagues at ISW and our partner project, the Critical Threats Project, have been assessing that, it looks like Putin is actually off of what his original plan was. And that's important because anytime you can get the adversary off balance, right, it creates opportunities. And the Ukrainians have absolutely exploited those opportunities to put up one hell of a fight. And they have fundamentally altered, what could have been the course of this war. And I think the disclosures, the intelligence disclosures, played a role in making that possible. And so what we're seeing from the Russians now is a recalibration, right? The war did not go according to plan. It is clear from everything we can tell publicly that Putin is nonetheless committed to this fight, even though his casualty count is extremely high, and despite the financial consequences that Russia faces and the potential for, domestic unrest. So we're watching for a couple things. The first is, it looks like the Russians may start calling up additional reinforcements and deploy more force into Ukraine. So we're watching for the potential that Putin actually, demands more of a mobilization of the Russian public to support this war, or that Russia could pull other, reserve forces, be that contractors from other theaters, or just deploying more of the Russian armed forces that is not yet in Ukraine. We are expecting that kind of reinforcement in coming days. We're also expecting the brutality level to continue to increase. And unfortunately, we have seen that in the last few days with the Russians taking the gloves off, so to speak, with some of the civilian targeting. And we're going to see more of that, I think, as the Russians start applying their rule book, from the Syrian war to Ukraine.
And what we're seeing in Russia, are you seeing more of the citizens for or against, would you say?
I mean, that's hard to say. And we don't look that closely at the Russian domestic situation. So I wouldn't want to, make an assessment that I can't support. But, there are lots of indications of civilian flight from Russia. He's trying to keep a lid on capital flight. And this is getting bad for Putin. How bad is anybody's, guess, in part because this is not our decision, right? This is the decision of the Russian population. Unfortunately, I think what we're going to see is increasingly, draconian measures by the Kremlin to impose, restrictions and measures like, potentially martial law on the population. We'll see how that goes, and we'll see what kind of response it gets. I
thought was kind of brain dead yesterday came out where they said that they were going to take all their protesters that they arrested, conscript them into the military, and then make them go to the front lines. to me, that doesn't seem like a brilliant move. Like people that are actively against the war, sending them to the front lines, you're just asking for people to quit and walk away. That one doesn't make a whole lot of sense, even from the Russian perspective. One other question that we get constantly, and Adam Kinzinger, amongst others, has proposed it, of a no-fly zone over Ukraine. What is the danger of NATO imposing a complete and total no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Look, I think it's important to note that a no-fly zone would be an act of war against the Russian Federation. So there is no such thing as imposing a no-fly zone that is not an entry into this war by the United States and NATO. So that's a very high threshold, and I think in some cases it's a higher threshold than people realize, because in the last few years and decade or more, no-fly zone has been thrown around as a option for the United States in humanitarian situations, like the war in Syria, et cetera. And it is, I think, understandable that the Ukrainians are demanding it. I think it's the kind of option that, the United States and NATO are probably seriously looking at, but I think it's important to recognize that that's not a small step. That's not a small entry into this conflict. That's the United States deciding to accept our entry into this war as a belligerent, and all of the second and third order consequences, that would follow.
And is there anything between the sanctions that we're seeing now and a no-fly zone? What do you think that the United States and our allies are doing to help Ukraine, are not doing to help Ukraine, that we could be doing that's not necessarily an act of war against the Russian Federation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more we can do in terms of military support to the Ukrainians. They need resupply, and they need very reliable, logistics support to get resources flowing from, allies and partners in the West into Ukraine, into Kyiv, et cetera. And they need significant humanitarian support. The humanitarian crisis is going to continue to grow. So far, Poland has not yet been, overwhelmed by the scale of the refugees, for example, that they face, but it's coming. If the Russians unleash the kind of, civilian targeting that we're expecting, the humanitarian situation is going to get a lot worse. And that's important because it can affect the war effort, right? Mm-hmm. When you have a humanitarian crisis that is being taken seriously by the West, it's much easier for the Ukrainian leadership, civilian and military, to focus on the fight. And so I think that's another very important element. The third is, I would say the United States needs to start getting real about contingencies. We've started to see reporting about Congress getting briefed, that this war could last a decade if the Ukrainians manage to hold out another few weeks, and if they morph into an insurgency. I think that's important because I don't think we've yet fully reckoned with what this looks like. And I think in some respects, we're so relieved that the Ukrainians have fought like hell and managed to stem, the scale of Russia's incursion. But that's not the same as actually being able to beat back the Russian invasion. And certainly the Ukrainians could soon be overwhelmed by Russian reinforcements. So I think we need to think through, what does that, insurgency situation look like? And how can the United States continue to apply limits on the kind of force or economic resources that Russia can bring to bear?
And do you think the escalation of us helping, as far as the humanitarian efforts go, could be considered an act of war in the Russian mind? Because to me, if my enemy is getting helped by somebody over and over again, eventually I'm going to assume, well, he's on their side. Like, he's also the enemy. Like, the amount of humanitarian effort that we're putting towards and helping Ukraine and getting all these things in order, that could also be considered an act of war from Russia, right?
I mean, it's not an act of war. I think that's right. Important for the record. But yeah, Putin can do whatever the hell he wants, right? And we're seeing him already say any economic support to Ukraine, will be punished. And so Putin is making these very big threats and very big statements that he will retaliate against anyone who supports Ukraine. And this is why the security of Europe is on the line in Ukraine, right? Putin does not distinguish. He already thinks the NATO alliance is at war with him. That's his mindset. That's his justification for this act of aggression. It's not true, but that's the world in which he's living, and that's how he's making his decisions. This is why the deterrent posture from NATO is so important. And this is why it's important for us to consider, what are our red lines, or what are our limits to what we're going to accept from Russia. And we're going to be tested. And I think the alliance needs to prepare for that.
And last question for you. Do we have an idea of what it would look like if the Russians were starting to turn, not Putin himself, but other influential people like the oligarchs there, the billionaires that are constantly coming out? For instance, the billionaire who just sold Chelsea and said that he wanted all that relief money to go to Ukraine. Is that going to be a shifting mechanism if all the influential people in Russia are going against Putin?
Look, it's exciting to watch, and hopefully it will grow. I think this is, an unforgivable thing that Putin is doing to the Russian population, in addition to an unforgivable thing he's doing to Ukraine. I hope that grows. My only hesitation in predicting where this goes is that, the Russian population is very resilient, and Putin's popularity and his ability to require sacrifices from his population is very high. And so I think we just need to be cautious in our expectations, because sometimes things that feel good and look good, don't actually have the full scale of the effect that we might hope that they will. We need to watch and see.
I think that is the perfect summary of what's going on in Ukraine for us here. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely lovely. I don't understand how people can keep all that information in their brain and make it like she was talking and I was watching her talk and it looked like she was just reading like a spreadsheet in her brain and like going through it. Very smart woman. And I was blown away by the things that she knows and the compassion and care of the intelligence community of what they're looking at and the things that they're looking for and how their methodology. I think all of that is fascinating because it's just something that is so far out of what my scope would be and could be. Like, I don't think I could, no matter what, I don't think if I took classes and I took all the courses, that's not something that I'd be capable of doing, but I am sure as shit glad that there are people that are capable and are doing that.
I have found Twitter, normally the hellscape that is Twitter. I have found certain NatSec people that I really trust, that I've looked at the background. I always see the bios and I scroll through the feed to get the vibe. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I trust this person. And some of them have had really informative threads that have helped. I was Charlie Kelly at the court board. I still am, but I understand things much better than I did. And Twitter has actually been a huge help in me understanding a lot that's been going on with this conflict. And they're on top of it, man. It's crazy. So.
They really are. It's fantastic. So thanks again to Jennifer for coming on the show. Let's move on to round number 5. This one, I've been thinking about it a lot over the past couple of weeks. Well, not really a couple of weeks, 2 weeks since this whole thing in Ukraine has really kicked off. And we see videos all the time of people getting captured, the Ukrainians capturing folks from Russia, their troops and things like that. And before I posted the first one that I really saw that I found to be remarkable was where they were FaceTiming or Skyping or WhatsApping, whatever, a Russian military member's mother while he was captured, and he was being taken care of. He didn't look like he'd been beaten or anything like that. But even in those statements, you have to be very careful, because I am very against posting any type of harm that's happening to a POW. I'm against any type of harm happening to a POW, especially showing that harm that happened. So being against it, but also understanding it is complicated. I think a lot of times when we have these super black and white rules where it's never, ever acceptable. But if you have a situation like what's going on in Russia, where it is widely reported and it's almost a guaranteed fact now that the Russian people and the Russian troops have zero idea what their government is doing to Ukraine and in Ukraine, it's like, how are they going to know?
Then you're talking about these videos where the Russian troops are captured and they're saying, we didn't even know. We thought we were coming here as an exercise. And a lot of people are pointing at that being like, boy, what a bunch of idiots. But I also read that is propaganda. And that's what Russia told them to say.
Right. So it is a
lot of people are feeling sympathetic to them. Like, they didn't know what they were doing. It's like, no, they've been told to say that. And that's what they're regurgitating. And people are taking that here and running with it, not understanding that they're feeding a line. They're feeding us a line.
And I understand that aspect too. And that's why I say it's a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
However, there's some videos, like there was a video where there's 3 Russian soldiers that were put in front of like an actual screen, like you would have at like the NCAA tournament or something like that. And they're giving their explanations about what the Russian people knew and what they expected. And if this guy is not telling the truth, the one that I'm referencing, he is a better actor than Daniel Day-Lewis. It is the single most believable speech that I've ever seen. Like when he's going through point by point, it's almost 20 minutes long of him explaining the process of what got them there, what he knew, and pleading with the Russian people and the other Russian troops to go home. I read that and I was like, people need to see this, but also at my core, I'm against people seeing this. And I think that that's where nuance comes in. And overall, I would say I'm very against showing POWs, but I do understand how this could be beneficial to put out there. It's tough. So I wanted to have a reminder before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, of what the actual Geneva Convention says about it and what the Human Rights Foundation and those types of groups say about how you are supposed to treat a prisoner of war. So I wanted to kind of go through that as a primer about what's expected of a prisoner of war and how to take care of a prisoner of war. So Kate, if you don't mind going through some of these statements from the Human Rights Watch.
Yeah, so we'll just go down the list. POWs should not be exposed to danger while awaiting evacuation from a fighting zone. So basically, if you have them, don't leave them just sitting out in the open. You need to get them to a safe place, just as you would anybody else. So don't keep them exposed to fire in a combat zone. You got to move them out. They have to be humanely treated at all times. Willful killing of them, ill treatment, torture, anything causing great suffering, moral suffering, revenge, sadism, that's a war crime. Reprisals against POWs are strictly forbidden. They can't be punished for acts they have not committed or subjected to collective punishment. They have to be protected in their honor. They must not be subject to insults, violence, public curiosity. So you can't put them up in the square and tar and feather them and let the public come over and
you could say that this one goes to video as well. It's not like in the public square, but it is the public square because it's on video, and that you could argue that that's the biggest public square in the world.
Right. And that comes with, they must not be paraded or interrogated in front of the media, and their images should not be used for political purposes. And here's where I can see there's so much propaganda from the Russian side. I can see the Ukraine being like, no, but look at this. Like, I get it. If they are questioned, POWs are only obligated to give their name and rank, date of birth, and army serial number. No torture or other form of coercion may be inflicted on prisoners of war to obtain from them any type of information. The U.S. has never done that. Women POWs have the right to be treated with due regard.
See, Kate, again, like we're talking about Russia and what they're doing in case, like, well, let's take a shot at the United States again.
Jeez,
Come on, Kate.
I know. Well, this whole thing has been having me reflect on. I'm not comparing. Listen, fuck
you
Russia government. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on this whole, seeing all this stuff has been make me do a lot of thinking.
No, and I think that you're right, and there definitely has.
But you're right.
There's a reason why Abu Ghraib was a huge deal, because these are the things that we did.
Right.
There's a reason why waterboarding was outlawed again, because of the things that it is. It's torture of prisoners of war.
It's a good time for self-reflection, is all I'm saying.
Right.
Women POWs, are not comparing us. I still think they're garbage. Don't worry. Women POWs have the right to be treated with due regard for their sex and to be given the benefit of at least the same treatment as the men. Children who are POWs are entitled to special treatment. POWs must be interned in premises according to hygiene. So they need somewhere to go to the bathroom. They need to be able to maintain basic hygiene. Because as we know, like in the military, they push hygiene so hard. One of the quickest ways to die in combat situations is to have bad hygiene and
bad infections, bacteria, all that kind of stuff.
They should be allowed to practice religion, send and receive letters, receive a copy of the Geneva Conventions, and appoint a representative among themselves to deal with the detaining authorities. POW also have duties derived from the laws of war. They're subject to laws and orders of the enemy army, and they can be tried and punished for the same infractions as the military that has captured them. If a POW tries to escape and is recaptured, the POW is only liable to disciplinary confinement. However, the POW may be punished for any violence used in the escape attempt. So
I think it's really important to point out that we, as the American military, will always adhere ourselves to Geneva Conventions and the laws of war. But a lot of times, especially in the last 20 years, we fought against enemies that don't necessarily adhere to these same standards and won't hold themselves to it. So I think you run into a very difficult moral challenge when you're faced with these sorts of situations to still do the right thing when your enemy is not doing the right thing with POWs.
And I will say what Khan said there is theoretically, I don't think that that's been the case. Like I would like to think that our military does that all the time, but there's certainly been examples over the last 20 years and longer where that doesn't happen. But I would say by and large, most units really try to adhere to that. But there's certainly examples and a litany of examples of us not doing that as well.
And again, you see your buddy get killed. all of a
Dude,
sudden
yes.
those rules go out the window. You are
And
a
that's-
human being. You're
right.
a human being, and you're
And-
full of rage, and that's war. It's an ugly thing.
And some of these things, whenever you're going through the list, like for instance, there was a fighter, or I think it was a helicopter pilot who was shot down this weekend. Russian helicopter pilot was shot down, and instantaneously, like they have a video of it going down, and there's not even a break in the action, and the Ukrainians are going up to this helicopter, and they're getting the Russian pilot out, and they immediately start talking to him almost in a calm voice. And I'm thinking in my own self of how I would react. And I know if I would have saw somebody shooting an RPG at a convoy and it killed a Marine or something like that, my initial reaction would have been much more intense than theirs. And I don't know how you put that aside. Like some of these things that are in the Geneva Conventions are there for good reason. But if you've ever been in armed conflict, knowing how difficult that would be in the moment to treat somebody kind and with compassion, that is a fucking
it's super difficult, and especially when you know the guys on the other side and gals on the other side aren't going to afford you those same luxuries of following all those rules. So I mean,
that's the biggest topic when you talk about prisoners of war here with our troops. Is like if we're going to war with somebody, by and large, they're not going to be adherers to the Geneva Convention. Like that's just the way it goes. Like you're not like we're not going up right now, England. Like we're not doing that.
And the whole reason for these, because war is hell and war is a nightmare, but these laws and rules maintain some sliver of humanity in all of it. And the more that gets thrown out the window, the more lives will be lost, the more suffering will result. It's a way of keeping the suffering and the death at least more minimal than it would be. So they are incredibly important, and it's a slippery slope and a slippery spiral, as difficult as it is. And I think
Zelensky and the Ukrainian military has been very smart in addressing this with their troops as well, because they are winning the information war big time against Russia, at least through the eyes of the West, whenever you see what's going on. However, if you take everything that Russia's doing and you have a couple videos that come out, even 1 or 2 videos of them being brutal to a Russian prisoner of war, any type of goodwill that you could establish in Russia by winning the information war, completely gone, because they will just, it's the same exact thing where you had what happened in Afghanistan. Remember when the Marines pissed on the body of the dead Taliban soldier that was there? Instantaneously, those videos, not just in Afghanistan, but around the Arab world, those videos go around, and it completely diminishes the mission. It makes everything that they're saying about you appear to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super important.
So I wanted to get into some of the things that are actually going on, a quick update. And this is from the Kiev Independent, which they are very much, I feel like, involved in propaganda as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty damn clear that they are. But there is certain aspects that I find to be interesting. And it'll be interesting to see what the actual numbers are. I don't feel like the troop numbers that the Kiev Independent are reporting are anywhere close. The DoD estimates said that they're probably about halfway off, where they're around 5,000 deaths right now for Russian troops. But 39 planes, 40 helicopters, 269 tanks, 105 artillery pieces, 945 armored personnel carriers, 50 MLRSs, 2 boats, 409 cars, 60 fuel tanks, 3 unmanned aircrafts, and 18 anti-aircraft warfare trucks that have been shot down or completely destroyed. From what I've read from certain experts, they don't know if Russia will be able to last another 10 days as far at the same strength that they have. 100% of the pre-stage strength that was posted at Ukraine's border whenever they were going, all of that is across, and they haven't gained an inch of ground in like 4 or 5 days around Kiev, which is pretty remarkable considering the size of Ukraine's strength versus what we perceive to be Russia's strength. It's really phenomenal what the Ukrainian people are doing.
And now with the sanctions starting to kick in, as I think where you start to see Russia starts to get bled dry a little bit. And if they can't resupply everything that they've already lost, it might come to an end sooner rather than later. I mean, you would hope. But that's where those sanctions now, coupled with the unbelievable fighting the Ukrainians are doing, you're really starting to see bear some fruit.
And it seems like too, like Putin has moved the goalposts, his request back a little bit. Like today it was like, okay, we'll end the war as long as you just give us those 3 little territories we wanted and promise to be neutral forever and blah blah. When I feel like a week ago it was like, give us everything, bitch.
Well,
Like
a week
you know.
ago they were Nazis, and now they're trying to build
Right.
dirty bombs. Like it has changed a
Things
ton.
he just
over
keeps
the last
changing the
weeks.
narrative. That's what.
And
By
he
the
doesn't
way,
have a way out. Like, what way out is there? I
No
do
matter
like
what, it
how
looks bad.
I do like how the global community is going after these rich fucking oil
that
tycoons.
teenager,
Mhm.
there's a teenager who
19
has
years old. Yeah.
19 years old. He has found out how to track all pardon me. Father.
Sexist.
Thank you. Sorry about that. She has found out how to track and now she's doing it with their boats too, all the private jets and the private yachts of the Russian oligarchs, and is watching as these fucking little worms go squiggling out to, I think I've been reading reports like trying to get to Canada, trying to get here, trying to get there. I just saw a group
Turkey is a big one because it's
Turkey
so
is a
like
big one.
France. So there was one that was going out at the $120 million mega yacht is what this guy had. And he went to the captain and said over the radio, he was like, we need to get to Turkey's waters as fast as possible before they seize my boat. France intercepted the communication, found out he was trying to leave, brought their little boats over there, and they're like, not so fast, my friend. This thing ain't going nowhere.
Yeah,
and then you had that other dude that worked at, I think it was in Greece or something, or no, maybe it was France too. And there was a guy that worked, he was from Ukraine, and he found a Russian billionaire's boat that was like another $100 million yacht, sank that motherfucker in the harbor, and said, I regret nothing.
Yeah. Badass.
I love it.
Yep.
That's
There was
fucking
also
awesome.
some small Canadian town had a plain land that was full of like wealthy Russian oligarchs or something, and they were like, no, you guys stay right here. We're getting our police over here to check this out. This isn't great.
Last thing I want to ask you guys about this situation. So over the weekend, we had huge companies from the international companies, really. I guess they are American companies, but international companies like Visa, MasterCard, Netflix, amongst others, who are saying that they're going to pull everything out of Russia. How do you guys feel about businesses removing everything like that, which we know will further collapse the economy of Russia? Cons, we'll start with you.
It's tough because on the one hand, you have all these citizens in Russia who have no impact and have no real skin in the game other than they're just Russian and they live there, that are ultimately going to be affected. But more importantly, I think, is the fact that this is what needs to be done. And I think this is what needs to be sent to the leadership, this message to the leadership of Russia to say, listen, like, yeah, hey, we know a lot of innocent people are going to be affected by this, but us affecting our business ultimately is not going to kill people, but the actions that you're going to continue to try to do will kill people. So I think it's a great alternative, and I ultimately think it's necessary. And although it might seem like silly, like, oh, you can't get Netflix in Russia anymore, I think all those things combined, those all add up to a very effective outcome, and it's what needs to be done right now.
I'm a dumb idiot, but like I've been seeing the interviews where Russian people like truly, they only have their state TV. Like they only know what they've been told. So they don't know what's going on. Do you think like, wait a minute, why aren't we getting Netflix or this fast food chain or whatever anymore? Like, if all these international things are pulling out, what are we doing? You know, is that possible? That's the message. That's what I think could happen. But certain organizations are taking a little bit of heat for not pulling out. Coca-Cola, not pulling out. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, a bunch of fast food chains are still operating there. Ritz crackers, Oreo, they're still there. If I'm high as shit and I can still get nice cold Sprite at McDonald's, I think everything's fine. Yeah, I don't give a fuck what's going on. So I do agree, like putting pressure on these companies to. Yeah,
like I understand the argument, like the Russian people didn't do anything. It's not their fault or anything like that. But you have to create discord in some way, shape, or form. If you go just status quo and everything is normal, they'll never know what's going on. To me, if you have all these companies pulling out, I'm looking at everything. Like, what the fuck is going on? I'm putting on my tinfoil hat. I'm watching KFC do his 1 Minute Man videos. I'm watching all that stuff I possibly can, trying to figure it out. But the issue is there's so many of those areas in Russia that are so rural that have no clue and they will never have any clue.
Right.
I mean, we look at it now and we're like, oh, it'd be very difficult for Russia to get accurate information. Yo, look around this country and look at what they view as logical news. Like there's so many people who view QAnon shit is real news, and they have free media here in the United States.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're still like, I mean, all these people that the dude from Saturday Night, or not Saturday Night Live, The Daily Show, will go to these huge MAGA rallies and talk to people, be like, oh yeah, Trump is president. He's going to be president with JFK Jr., who's been dead for a decade. And they believe that shit. So if people
I recently
in
talked
America
to a guy
can
who's a
believe
big
it,
Stop the Steal fella still in the year of our Lord 2022. What the fuck? You know? But you know, I will say a good thing. Fago, the soda, has pulled out of
I was waiting
pulled
on
out
them.
of Russia, and all
Russian
the Russian
juggalos are going to
the
be
Russian juggalos are furious. They're furious. The little hatchet men are running around like crazy. They want to know. They're like starting to question things a little bit. So thank you to Fago for
it's
doing
crazy.
that.
I was just thinking back to when I was in Iraq and you'd run into Bedouins and you'd speak to them and they didn't even know who Saddam Hussein was. So, I mean, it's a very similar situation in Russia, I'm sure, in parts of the country where they don't probably even know who Putin is. And you would think like, how is that even possible? It's very possible. So it's, as I said.
Not only that, but you had like when we would talk to the Green Berets who went out on horseback in Afghanistan, and they were talking about their first year or two in country, there'd be people that they would meet in Afghanistan who had no idea what 9/11 was. They're like, what the fuck is that? Like, we don't know what that means. Like,
what?
We take it for granted because we have all this information at our fingertips at all points during the day. Basically, almost everybody in this country does. And we forget that the rest of the world lives a lot differently than us. And I mean, that's just, quote unquote, elitist American thinking that you would just forget. Like you just assume the rest of the world lives as well as we do, and you take it for granted. But so like I said, I think it's necessary.
We got our share of ignorant, dumb fucks here too.
Oh,
There's no doubt about that.
We're not short on stupid people here.
Yeah.
I'm one.
All right, let's move on to Save Rounds and Alibi, which today is going to be brought to you by our good friends at Rocky Boots. If you haven't tried Rocky Boots yet, what are you waiting for? They are the boots that are built for men and women that serve and protect the country. They're designed and built in the U.S. for each individual branch of the military. Most recently, Rocky has sided with the United States Marine Corps and developed a boot specifically for us. Rocky's USMC boot is very compliant and made right here in the USA. Whether you're going to be rucking in the desert, working in the yard, or getting out this summer for a special hike. And by the way, did you guys see my hiking video? Our picture that I put up? The whole squad was
Taking
going
with
out
the family.
There. It's been fun. Cardi is finally at the age now where they like to go out and do the hikes too, mainly because I had to make the promise that any of the highest peaks, I will put McCartney on my shoulder so they get the best view of anybody in the family. Because they actually they made a good point. Like when we go to these places, or if we go to a skyrise building or something and everybody gets to look, I always get the worst view because I'm the shortest. And I was like, you know what, you're right. How about we'll do a harder trail and I'll pick you up and put you on my shoulder so you get the best view. And I was only able to do that because my tiny little baby ankles were protected by our good friends at Rocky Boots, because they have high soles and high heels that make me not roll my ankles, which is fantastic. Go get some Rocky Boots using the promo code ZBT at checkout for 25% off your next pair of boots. Let's move on to Save Rounds and Alibis. Cons, we'll start with you.
Cool. You mentioned the S2 brief that I provided. People forget that at one point when I was in Iraq, I also wore the S2 hat. So it should come as no surprise that sometimes I'll just break into S2 mode. So it's just something that I do. Last week we saw something come out about Jon Stewart. I don't know the validity of this, may or may not be considering a run for office. How do we feel about Jon Stewart running for office?
I'm all in. He walks the talk. I'm impartial, I guess, because I was in his program, and it's one of the reasons that led me to Barstool Sports eventually, his veteran immersion program at the Daily Show. And he would personally come in and just was the most wonderful. He's not full of shit like most politicians. So I don't know. I
agree. I think
he's, for me, it depends on the office that he runs for.
Yeah.
I think there is something to be said for experience, and having zero governmental experience and jumping right into office.
I'm blindly voting for him.
Not something that typically
Hands
works out.
down.
But if he wants to start off as like a representative or something like that, sure. But I think that we've seen a lot of people who didn't work in politics and then jumped into it, thought that they were going to do something and just look incredibly ignorant, like Tommy Tuberville. I think that's a good example of people who don't know.
I will say,
I think having his feet underneath them in the office would probably be the best.
Yeah, I'm in between the two of you, like where I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because of all the work he's done for post 9/11 veterans and being a mouthpiece for us as well as ground zero workers. And he really, as Kate said, has been walking the walk and put in that time and effort when he doesn't have to do that, but he has seen that he has a platform and used it for good. Whereas I think so often with celebrities, they want to say they do a lot and they will go to a rally or an event and they wear a t-shirt, but they don't actually like do much. Whereas he is actually doing the legwork. And I just think back to that interview he did with the Secretary of the VA, where he kind of really held his feet to the fire. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And to your point, chaps, maybe the office will be dependent upon this, but overall, I'm interested to see if that in fact plays out and he does go for a run there. So that's all I got.
All right, Nicholas, you got anything?
Yeah, I just want to say I love that hiking story. I love the strategy of the shortest person gets on the on the shoulders there. I mean, I kind of feel like I robbed myself.
ZBT ever goes on a hike, Nick, you are right up there, bud.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've gone to many concerts where I've just looked at the back of another gentleman's neck.
That's brutal.
So I will be taking up on that offer.
But it'll be sweet when we all go to Disney World and Nick can just stay back when we're on the rides and hold our stuff. That'll be sweet.
Be great. I'll keep you guys. Jesus, I'm moving on.
All right, Kate, what do you got?
Clip out. No.
Can you imagine just Nick on my shoulders, just like
with the ears on? With the ears on, I'll wear the ears.
You can borrow my hiking pack that I got for the baby. We can all baby Bjorn everybody.
Oh, that'd be so sweet.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And we get to go on the parents line too, which is always shorter.
True.
Kate, what do you got?
So more serious on my end, I got a DM last week right after we finished recording on Thursday from a fellow Marine named Zach. And he said, I know this is a long shot, but could my friend Corporal Dallas Alvey get a shout out? He lost his inner battle early this morning, and this was last Thursday. Corporal Alvey was a Marine's Marine, the most genuine guy you've ever met. He loved video games. He's survived by his wife and 11-month-old daughter. My son is 11 months old, and my heart just, I can't even imagine. I looked him up. I just wanted to see his face and learn more about him. And I was reading on Facebook some posts from other guys who were in the unit with him. And somebody else had posted about Corporal Alvey and wrote this: I feel like these past 2 years, I keep losing those I have worked hard with, almost all from my boot camp platoon too. I saw this last post and I couldn't believe what he was saying. I didn't want to believe he was saying goodbye to us all. He had left a post on his social media. He had just become a father too. Dallas Alvey, I wish I had known what you were going through, man. I feel like all too many of us know that feeling. I wish I had known what you were going through, man. I feel like almost all of us at this point have had that thought. I can't think of another veteran I know who has not been touched by something like this at this point, which is insane and just it's just crushing. And he does seem like he was an absolutely wonderful Marine. So to all the friends and family of Corporal Dallas Alvey, just keeping you, sending you so much love and thinking of him and remembering him, and especially his wife and his 11-month-old daughter. Reach out to your buddies. It's nobody's fault. Don't beat yourself up, but you are so not alone. You know, it's never too late to get help. It's never too late to get help. Just keep swimming, just keep going. And
one of those things that Kate is talking about is getting the right type of health. And we constantly talk about getting therapy and things like that, but sometimes it feels like you really are swimming against the
feels
stream.
Impossible.
Like it does feel impossible because you're going through it over and over again. One of the main reasons why I was retired from the Marine Corps was from traumatic brain injury. And I joke about short-term memory, but my memory has been worse than it's ever been over the last couple months. Like it's gotten even worse. And so I have been dealing with this in a lot of different ways. And recently, last week, I got a message from somebody who works at the University of Tulane, and they have what's called the Center for Sport.tulane.edu, and it's a center of brain health. And it started with them trying to identify what could be causes of CTE in NFL players and high-level college football players and things like that. And they have transitioned their mission to more veteran-oriented. And they have a ton of funding. And I was talking with them this morning about they have a course that is around 3 weeks long that you go down there and you see 18 different types of specialists during this 3 weeks that you're there. And they come up with a full comprehensive treatment plan, and everything is 100% free. They put you up in a hotel. They allow a family member or a best friend to come along with you so that they know how to support you in this journey as well. If you have been struggling with your memory or with PTSD, things that are related to traumatic brain injury, reach out to them. We'll put this link in our YouTube video, so you could just go and click on it and try to get some help there. These are people that are wanting to help. They have a ton of funding. They are partnered with organizations like the Marcus Fund and the Gary Sinise Foundation as well. They are going to do big things, and we're hoping to partner with them more to get more and more folks help, because a lot of the suicide epidemic stems from things like PTSD, untreated depression, untreated anxiety, and untreated traumatic brain injury. And if we can nip some of those things in the bud at the same time, that's what we all need to be doing. We have a responsibility, whether you're in Congress, whether you're in government, whether you're a podcast listener, or you're sitting behind an accountant's desk, to do everything that we possibly can to help this community. It's been a 20-year effort, and it's going to be a 70-year effort going forward. So make sure that you're clicking on that if you need it. And if you need more information, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to pass that along. Until then, we'll see you on Friday. Sound the retreat.